Yeah, we better get into it.
Yeah, let's
Um,
do it.
so, hey, Corey, welcome to the channel.
Hello, thank you.
Hey, so this is a segment that I'm going to be calling Sketch Talk. And I just thought it'd be fun to have friends, relatives, colleagues on to talk synths, talk music tech. And Corey, I wanted to have you on first because we've been working together for quite a while now, I realized. And also, you did a lot of the factory presets on both Flipbox and Phase Monkey. So, to just start off, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what your background in music is, and a little bit about what you're up to currently.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm honored to be the first guest. I think it's cool that you're starting this new brand with Sketch Audio and that I'm like get to be a part of it. And yeah, we've been working together for a while with SDSX and just music stuff in general. So that's yeah, it's just fun to be a part of and see what your next thing is going here. But yeah, my name is Corey Lofthus online. I go by Soullift a lot, Soulyft, and have a lot of music and art things kind of there. Uh, and yeah, I've been in music ever since I can remember. Started out learning how to play drums in school long time ago. I think fifth grade is when I started taking lessons. So that's many, many, many years ago now, and have been involved in music ever since. Got kind of interested in the technology side of things with engineering uh, in college, and then got kind of interested in the business side of music just after that. And have a few different websites. So I do a lot of different things in music, and let's see, what am I working on now? I went more into the technology side of things. I was really inspired working with you and building apps and also based off of your encouragement, started learning to code a little over a year ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
exciting
yeah,
stuff.
it's been super fun.
Yeah, well, yeah, I remember we met a long time ago. I was at some kind of youth conference. I remember we had a mutual friend, and you were running sound, and I was playing
Yeah,
keys. And then I don't know, we met and then sort of didn't talk for a while. But then I remember you kind of said, hey, we should maybe do a drum app together.
yeah,
And that's when we really started working together. And that was SDSX, which you can get on the App Store. And you did, I think, pretty much all the factory kits for that. And that's a sample based instrument. And you did a lot of like recording analog drum synths for that. And I think that was when I really first realized like, this guy's got a good ear. And he also has a really like um, unique way of kind of approaching an instrument. You have good sense of like how instruments should feel to interact with. And that's one of the first things I actually wanted to talk about is just sort of thinking back on your own history as a musician. What are some like instruments that you've played that you've really found to be like fresh and inspiring, and why?
yeah. Let's see, instruments that I find fresh and inspiring. So, I don't know, for some reason, I think all the way back to like the very first drum sequencer that I ever used. It wasn't even an instrument. It was on my dad's like laptop. He had this thing. I think it was called Virtual Drummer. I have not been able to find it, but this was probably like the first drum sequencer thing. And you could just add whatever drum sounds you wanted on this menu on the left side. And then it had a
Mm-hmm.
grid, and you could subdivide the grid in different ways. And I would just like fill in the boxes on this drum sequencer thing. And for some reason, I don't know, that question made me think of that as far as like just something where it is very simple, but it like kind of showed me like what sequencing was without really just like, oh, just fill in
Yeah,
these boxes.
yeah.
Um, and then on the synth side of things, um, a friend of mine, when I was working at a church in Eugene, he had a microbrute, Arturia
Oh,
microbrute.
yeah.
It's a little monophonic synthesizer, like it's tight, it's like only like this big, but it
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's what I kind of learned on. So it's like really simple. I learned like what an ADSR was, and like I just fell in love with like a filter, and it can get pretty like gnarly sounding. So it was just super fun to mess around with. Um, and then I can't also go by this question and not say the Teenage Engineering OPZ,
Yeah.
because it kind of that's kind of what like started me releasing my own music, in a sense.
Hmm.
I used that kind of as my draw when I first started being active on Instagram and releasing music, and it's just, yeah, super inspiring because it's so immediate once you learn all this stuff and what it can do. It's just, you just kind of can make something really, really quickly.
Yeah, I remember, um, you know, when you got the OPZ and you kind of told me about it, it was as if you'd had like some kind of revelation. And it just
Yeah,
sort of clicked with you. And it's funny because I feel like I actually hear from quite a few people that sort of same experience where it just seems like for a lot of people, the OPZ really clicks, which is so interesting because, it doesn't have a screen or anything.
yeah,
And I remember I borrowed it from you,
yeah,
and I was impressed how even without a screen, once you just kind of get into the workflow, it just kind of works how you sort of expect it to.
yeah,
And like you can use the app as a screen, but like you don't even really need to. So I just think, yeah, the OPZ is a really interesting instrument. And I mean, yeah, the music that you've made on it is really cool. Yeah, you're on my regular Spotify rotation.
I appreciate that. Yeah, with the OPZ, uh, it got me out of being in a DAW and making music that way, which is what I had been doing. But it also like, I don't know, it was the first thing that I had that did anything with sequencing that wasn't just like A to B. Like you could
Yeah.
go to D and then come back to B and just go like all around. And I was like, oh, like this is new to me from that
Hmm.
virtual drummer that I was talking about, where it's just like, okay, just goes down the line. And this was like, oh,
Yeah.
you can do something more with the sequencer, and it was really fun and interesting.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems interesting because it's easy to get kind of stuck in sort of like loop mode. There's a lot of tools that are sort of oriented to making loops, but it
Yeah,
seems like the OPZ gives you some ways out of that,
yeah,
to kind of build your structure, but you're still not like working in a traditional timeline either. So it seems like an
yeah.
interesting kind of workflow.
Yeah, yeah, I like it a lot. And yeah, when we swapped, we had when you borrowed my OPZ, I had borrowed your OP1, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, let's see what this is all about. And I was like, I kind of miss my OPZ. But yeah,
Yeah,
anyways,
they're just two
yeah,
different
very different.
animals, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the next question is, there is so much technology out there, so many different workflows out there. And so when you sort of encounter a new instrument, new plugin, new device, how do you like to approach it in terms of learning it and figuring out what it can do?
Um, I like to see what I can do immediately, like without looking at a manual, without trying to like figure something out, like and get any outside influence. I'll just like press buttons, press keys, turn knobs, and just try to like discover it. Um,
Hmm.
because I don't know, I come from I'm a drummer. Like the drums are my first instrument, and like there's nothing to learn. You just kind of hit it and you listen to it, right? It's like, okay, if I hit it this
Yeah.
hard, it sounds like this. If I hit it towards the edge, it sounds like this. Like there's nothing to really learn about it, like technically. Like you just have to listen. And so
Hmm.
I like to do that. Like obviously there's some times where you can't do that, like back to the OPZ, for example. Like I think if I picked that up without any prior knowledge, I would be lost. But once you get
Yeah.
the overall workflow of it, like the kind of menus that it has and the layout of it, it has a similar thing where you're just like, okay, if I fill this in here, what does it sound like? If I turn this, what does it sound like? And without the screen, it kind of gives some of that back to me where I just like, yeah, I think the short answer of it is like, I just like to discover what this instrument has.
Yeah, kind of push the limits,
Yes.
see if you can break it.
Yeah, and yeah, so I start out by discovering like what it does, and then I'm like, okay, what can I take this to? What is the absolute limit of where it lives? And I try to push it there and then bring it back, or like, or something, I don't know. This kind of flows into a little bit, but I have a Moog DFAM, and
Hmm.
it's this gnarly drum machine sounding thing that's as similar to Blipbox in some ways, but I like to also like take that to the other extreme and make it super tame and like do ambient
Yeah,
stuff with it. And it's like, I don't know, just those like the dichotomy of like, okay, this should be something really nice and pretty, make it gnarly. This should be something really gnarly, make it pretty.
yeah,
And like, what character does that bring?
yeah. No, totally. If you try to use it not the way it was intended to be
Yeah.
used, you can kind of stumble upon some interesting things.
Yeah. And if everybody, like, I don't know, for better or worse, find myself wanting to be a unique individual and more unique. So it's like if everybody's using it this way, like I don't want to do that. Like it's been done before. I'm gonna try something new. So
Yeah. Man, well, cool. And that, it certainly comes across in the presets that you designed. And I want to kind of get into that a little bit. And so we could start by talking about Blipbox, which, my goal in making it was to create kind of a compact, fun, and flexible drum synth that can also have a lot of like bite. And I
hmm
really think the presets you ended up doing really showcase like the variety of sounds that can come from it. So my first question on Blipbox is, what were kind of your influences when you're approaching the instrument and designing the sounds? And, this could be just for the listeners, I'm thinking about anything from artists, that were influenced, specific songs, instruments, or even more abstract things like ideas or features of the synth. So yeah,
yeah,
what were your influences on the Blipbox presets?
yeah. For one, I did the same thing with Blipbox that I'll do with any instruments, like just trying to like discover it and just as I change settings, like what do I like, what do I not like, and just kind of that feedback of like this sounds cool, and just kind of like lean into like what's there. But I did take a little bit of inspiration from our like initial talk. You enjoyed some of the sounds on Postal Service, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so you sent me a link to one of their albums, which I hadn't listened to them much, and I was like, oh, okay. I kind of click through to get like just the overall vibe of it. I was like, there's these kind of short clicky, blippy sounds that like have weight, but they're not like super clean. Very like I don't know,
Mhm.
analog kind of sounding.
Yeah,
So for a couple of the kits, I definitely leaned into that side of things. And then for some of the kits, I tried to like go with some of my favorite like analog analog electronic drum kits. Like I really like 808 909 type of sounds and like
hmm,
tried to emulate those a little bit. But then there were some times where yeah, I would just like follow the synth or follow the drum synth and be like, okay, what is this thing doing? And just like yeah, I
yeah.
would like go to start making this like yeah 808 themed kit, and then it turned into like these wild sounds. I was like, okay, I can't stop this. I'm just gonna like let it happen, and we'll try to go back to the more traditional sounds later.
Yeah, one thing I would do, I'm not as much of a drummer myself, so I would, I'd kind of take a sound and then sort of copy the settings to a different pad and then kind of create a variation on it
Yeah.
and then just sort of keep doing that. And it's really like things could get wild really fast.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. I did that a couple times. Yeah, I would like, especially when I was like making like kicks and snares or something, like I would make
yeah,
a kick and then I would copy it and then like change the pitch or like try to just do like a little bit of variation on it so that, yeah, there's like, yeah, 16 sounds. So you're trying to make a few things that are similar and copy and cohesive. So copying it was definitely one way. And then another thing I did to try to keep some of them a little bit cohesive, was I would focus on a specific aspect of the app and like try to keep that fairly
yeah,
consistent.
yeah.
Like the distortion section, it's got like a
Hmm,
bit crushing type of one and then
hmm.
some other type of distortion going up, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And so,
Wave folding up.
wave folding, there you go.
Yeah.
And so I would either like have the wave folding on the whole kit for the most part,
Hmm.
or I would go down into like the bit crushing and like try to just keep that. I think on the first couple of kits I did that, and then yeah, some of the more uh chaotic type of like frequency modulation stuff too. Like there's maybe a few kits in there that are like, oh, it's like really focusing on making sounds, listening around that.
Yeah, yeah, little things like that can kind of tie things together. I know one of your kits stamps too that all the sounds are like kind of
Yeah.
short and tight, but there was still like a really big variety in kind of the timbres, that were coming out of it. So you felt like you had a full kit, even though everything was sort of short and punchy.
Yep, and that was yeah, that was all in your like envelope section. The tight was like all the way tight.
Yeah. Yeah. So which of the kits that you put together do you think turned out the best or is the most fun?
I liked the analog one, which I think might show up first
Yeah.
alphabetically, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I had actually spent a few days in like off and on like made like 5 kits, and
Hmm.
then I was like, I really still kind of want like a more traditional sounding one, like that isn't quite so
Hmm.
wild. And I had learned the instrument enough where like I went
Hmm.
to make the analog one, and I was like, oh, this worked. Like I just kind of knew where to go to get the right sounds and shape it the way that I wanted to. So
Nice.
I really enjoyed that one. But I also, it's hard not to like laser tag. Uh,
Yeah, that one is wild. Yeah.
that was the first one where it started going off the rails, and I was like, I couldn't stop it. I was like, whatever type, I just like kept kind of copying and pasting. I was like, whatever magic I have going on here, like it's got some wicked sounds going on. So
Yeah, the effects kit is pretty crazy too.
yeah, and that one was like definitely more. Laser tag was not intentional when it started out. I was like, what is going on? And then it's funny. The effects one actually was after analog. I was like, okay, I know the synth a little bit better. Let me try to do something a little crazier.
Yeah. Yeah, well, man, I think they all turned out great. So yeah, thanks for spending the time on those.
Oh, it's super
And
fun.
maybe the next thing we can talk about is Phase Monkey, which is a very different instrument, a
Yes.
lot nicer
Yeah.
than Blitbox's mean machine.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I guess so. Thinking about now the Phase Monkey presets, going back to some of the inspirations and influences on your kind of sound design process for that. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I think this one was more about the just discovery of it. It had, I think I had a few, or I had less, like, oh, I want to try to make this sound specifically. Um, it was more, yeah, going through the different wave shapes and then just kind of going through the synth from there and be like, what does this sound like? And then also tried to do a variety for sure. Like if I had a lot of things with like a long tail, I would try to do something shorter or like make a pad
Hmm.
versus like a lead. And so just try to do a bit of variety. Um, but there was some on there that definitely leaned. I don't know. It was something where it was like as I was designing it, if I couldn't stop like playing it or like listening to it, then I'm like, oh, this is done.
Yeah,
I'm ready to move
yeah.
on.
Then you know,
Yeah.
yeah. When you start having fun with it, like
Yeah, I was like,
okay,
oh,
yeah,
I could probably move on from this one.
yeah. So, um, I guess yeah. In terms of like, you talked about yeah, trying to kind of explore the limits. Is there like I guess a way you sort of approach a synth in terms of like the order you go about things when you're doing sound design, or is it more of a free flowing process?
Fairly free flowing. Like, I don't know, I would generally start with like the wave shape and like kind of go left to
Hmm.
right, but it was also like I would also just like explore a section of it and then
Hmm.
adjust the parameters around it. So like if I was interested in like doing something interesting with the envelope section, like a delay, for instance, like
Yeah.
I would set that up and then I would be like, okay, now what sounds need to feed into this
Hmm.
to make it work? So it's, I don't know, it's never over till it's over. So it's like you kind of start somewhere and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that also a lot of my sound design and like creative process is like you take something, you kind of try to like destroy it, and then you bring it back and see what's left. Like, and so
Yeah.
I did a bit of
Hmm.
that, like even with like the detune or
Hmm.
the yeah modulation section or just anything, just like try to make it or like listen to what it is, bring it beyond what I think sounds actually good, and then
Hmm.
try to find places to bring it back and live in a cool
Yeah, that's a
spot.
good point because, if you don't like push it, then you can just kind of you can kind of end up designing the same sounds over and over,
Yeah,
because people know what they like. You
yeah,
got things you go to. But if
yeah,
you
for sure.
push it and then bring it back, then you can end up, maybe
Yeah.
with something interesting that you wouldn't just go straight to.
Oh yeah, for sure. And yeah, like I wouldn't traditionally like use like even maybe detune too much in anything I'm
Hmm.
designing, but like I found that that part was particularly interesting because you could find like a lot of different spots within that slider of like
Yeah,
when you play a single note, like the overtones that you're getting, and there's some like really actually in the middle, it was just like an octave, it felt like, or something like a fifth.
yeah,
It was just
yeah,
very nice sounding, and I was like, oh, this can add into something else. So, um, yeah, each little section has something to explore for sure.
yeah. No, the detune. I mean, I just love a little bit of like fine detune, you know.
Yeah,
So I just wanted a fader where I could just get the
yeah,
sound like instantly. Yeah, so I do that a little bit for myself. But then I was like, oh yeah, I could do coarse detune as well.
yeah,
And then yeah, you get up to like 2 octaves. And so it's just a really easy way to kind of split the layers and get a thicker sound if you want. But yeah, you can get some really interesting things when you kind of combine that with the modulation oscillator
yeah,
and the ring mod. It can get
yeah.
really wild.
Yeah, the ring
Yeah.
mod for me was the section where I was like, okay, this thing can get out of control.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I was really, really sort of pleased with how that came together. The synth is inspired by the phase distortion synth, the Casio CZ series, and yeah, they had that kind of dedicated ring mod oscillator, but they also had this really kind of unique noise distortion, um, which I didn't. I tried to kind of ballpark it,
yeah.
get the spirit of it. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but it's an interesting noise distortion too because it changes with the timbre and with the pitch.
Oh,
So there's definitely some interesting stuff in there
yeah.
for people to explore.
Yeah, it was very fun to explore. Like, I don't know, it all fits on a phone screen, but like, there's still enough to like go through. Like, I don't know, you don't,
Yeah,
I mean, even when I was done, I don't know, I think I made 15 or so of the presets, and like, even after that, like, I didn't run out of ideas. Like, there was no spot
yeah,
where I was
yeah.
like, oh, I don't have something to explore and to find out with this, or like, I could go back and keep going,
Yeah, the
and
goal
yeah,
is to put as much on the screen as you can, but still keep the controls like big enough
yeah,
and keep the engine focused. So I was happy. I didn't really even I was a little worried that it might not have enough like variety of sounds that it would be capable of. But when I kind of started programming some presets as well, I was like, hey, this is a
yeah.
lot of fun.
No, yeah.
So I yeah
Which speaking of, yeah, your presets sound so good. Like I was going through them this morning, and yeah, the variety of just those presets alone, I was like, dang, this thing can do even more than I was like messing around. Because yeah,
yeah
like I
yeah
wasn't trying to make specific sounds necessarily. I would make something and be like, what does this sound like? Okay, that's what I'll name it. Um,
yeah.
but
Yeah, I
like,
think,
yeah,
the
it's really good.
Casio CZs, they're kind of noted for, they can do really nice kind of thick pads.
Hmm.
But that's certainly not the end of the story, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And then anyways, yeah, I don't want to go too long on this, but yeah, we got to mention the 8 stage envelopes,
yes,
which are fairly unique. And I thought you got some interesting stuff out of that. Like you said, you can use them to get sort of delay sounds or
Yeah.
kind of release like click noises.
Yeah.
So you can simulate kind of harpsichord type
Yeah.
envelopes that way.
Yeah.
And I sent them to you basically without any explanations. But
Yeah.
you know, like you do, you're able to kind of
Yeah.
get them figured out, and yeah, you put them to some good use.
That is one thing I did have to do a little bit of research on because you said what the inspiration was, and I was like, I've never used an envelope like this before, and like, just yeah, I was like, what is this thing doing? I don't get it.
Yeah,
But as soon as I got it, it clicked, and I was able to utilize the three different sections, and yeah, it's yeah, it almost adds like those clicks, like you can add like an almost physical modeling ness
yeah,
to it,
yeah,
or like build in like extra effects that aren't really technically part of the synth, uh,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
pretty cool.
exactly.
So
Um, and I guess just a quick plug, if you want to learn how those envelopes work, we have a tutorial video also on this
nice.
channel. So just go ahead and check that out. Really fun.
Link it
Definitely,
right
I
here.
haven't really. Yeah, link is somewhere. I have not seen those envelopes on other iOS synths, so I think it's a fairly unique feature. Um, and yeah, you know, you can get some interesting effects out of them that are just not possible with your typical ADSR. So I guess we're just moving on. Which of your Phase Monkey presets are you kind of most pleased with? Do you think turned out the best?
Yeah, probably ones that actually utilize that envelope section in a unique way. I think two of my favorites. One would be the calm delay one, I think it's called.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
it has kind of an arbitrarily timed delay, kind of almost not quite as long as I could make it, but like it
yeah,
repeats two or three times. I think it could do three times with the eight stages. Um,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
it's actually very similar to like what I'll compose like on an OPZ with like the
Hmm.
tape delay or a long delay on
Hmm.
there, where I'm like, okay, I can play very simply because I'm not a skilled piano player or keyboardist,
Yeah,
but I can kind of play and listen and respond with playing back on it. And the other one that utilizes that envelope section in a very unique way is there's I forget the exact name of it, but it's like super shifted tape
oh yeah,
stop
yeah,
or something,
yeah,
which I couldn't really find a way around it the way that I was using it and doing it. So you have to like octave your keyboard down or pitch
yeah.
shift your MIDI going into it like a couple octaves down because it's pretty high. But it like does this like tape stop with the pitch afterwards, and I was like, oh, this is
Yes,
so
yeah.
cool. So
Yeah, I noticed
that
that
was fun.
one. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
a fun
I
one.
like that. But I also really enjoyed. Like I said, I was playing around with your presets this morning. I really liked your music box one and like the pad, a couple of the pads that you did. Like they just sound really, really good.
Thanks. Yeah, no, the music box one, honestly, I think was my favorite of the ones I came up with because I felt like the kind of little hollow sound with a lot of overtones and not a
Yeah,
lot of fundamental. I just kind of
I have
stumbled upon it and I was like, oh, I really liked it.
no
So I was
idea how
happy
you
with
did
that.
that. It was so cool.
Neither do I. Yeah. But yeah, going back to, I also really liked the calm delay patch because you also have a little bit of noise fading in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it like does the delay with the synth sound, but then you fade in the
yeah.
noise
It's like
mod.
this super subtle of
Yeah,
the noise mod, and I think that even
yeah,
uses like the mod envelope section to like do something different each
yeah,
time. So it's like definitely has a lot of character and like it's fun to just like play and listen to. So.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm excited about the launch, and yeah, I just want to say thanks for being involved, and yeah, I mean, I'll definitely get you to do more factory presets in the future.
I will gladly do it. It's super fun to do. I'm super excited to see what people make with these. Like I don't know, there's a lot of process that you go through and we go through making things and these tools to get out to people, and you're like, what's gonna happen with it, and then I'm always surprised when it comes back. So I'm really excited for
Yeah,
you with both of these,
yeah,
just to see what people come up with and what they make with
yeah.
it.
I
So
think that's a fun part for sure. Is like, I get so bogged down in the details, of like, the code,
yeah,
and you kind of forget that. Oh yeah, you can have fun with these things,
yeah,
and so it's always refreshing to see people using it, because like, oh yeah, that's what it's supposed to do.
yeah.
Like it's supposed to be fun and help people
It's
make music. And
it's making
anyway,
music.
so it's definitely rewarding. And anyway, so yeah, thanks for coming on. And to just wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of um, talk about where people can find you on the internet, some of your different projects. And so, yeah, tell us about those before we head
Yeah,
out.
yeah. So most of my stuff, I have a landing page at soulliftaudio.com, SOULYFT audio.com. And that'll have all the social links, music links. I have a blog that I've been very terrible at keeping up, which I might, it's the fall, so maybe I'll get back into it. Or the fall's
Yeah,
just about
yeah.
coming up. Um, so you find it there. If you are a Teenage Engineering OPZ fan, or user, I run a website called opzpacks.com.
Hmm.
And I'm also slowly working on actually a Eurorack company with a friend of mine in Lithuania called Evolving Voices.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't have anything official yet, but we've been working on a specific module and utilizing some machine learning and AI. So we'll see where all of that goes. But many hats, and yeah, if anybody has any questions, also just reach out and yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to see where that project goes. But you also have music on Spotify, right? Did you mention that?
Yes, that can be on my landing page. I think I have a Spotify link there, just under the
Okay.
artist handle Soul Lift. I think I have a Bandcamp as well. So yeah, my stuff is just about everywhere. And I am trying to come out with a little EP in the next
Oh,
month or
sweet.
so. I have the music recorded, just working on the artwork
Oh,
and
nice.
the naming and all that stuff is actually the hardest part for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, a lot of good stuff on your Spotify, a lot of OPZ and Eurorack, right?
Yep. The very first album I did was all in the box style stuff, but after that, it's all been, yeah, the OPZ has been utilized in some way, and then more recently, it's been OPZ plus Eurorack stuff, and that
Hmm.
is similar with this next thing coming out. I ran my kalimba into my
Hmm.
Eurorack,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I had my OPZ, I think, sequenced a bit of drums, or at least was clocking it. So
Hmm.
I'm excited for it. It's different, a little different than the stuff I had released, but I like it, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
send it out there.
Yeah, I know the Eurorack crowd tends to be fairly like only Eurorack some of the time, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had with like using things with Eurorack. And I think
Yes.
honestly, iPads, iPhones are great companions to Eurorack. Get a little MIDI
Yes.
module, or you've done some incredible sequencing with the OPZ that I've seen. So
Well, and even I think when you first released Uda, I like plugged that into my Eurorack, or maybe I even utilized my OpenD to like just translate it into the Eurorack, and it was like
yeah.
just very fun to sequence it in a different way. Cause like it with Eurorack, you have all of the stuff that kind of needs to be hands on, and I mean that's at least the way I play it. I'm just like feeding it information and then reacting to it. So I need
Yeah.
something external to sequence it, but then
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
I don't know. I've kind of brought the Eurorack into the studio to pair up with the traditional songs and
Hmm.
uh, music production, and it's just a good inspiration, and then it's almost like its own. It's more than an instrument to me. It's like its own like musician in a sense, where you
Yeah.
just kind of get
Yeah.
inspiration from it and just put something in it and see what comes out.
Sweet. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on, Corey. This has been the first episode of Sketch Talk. Definitely plan
Yeah,
to have you involved more in the future, and just encourage those watching to check out Corey's music, Corey's projects. If you have an OPZ, check that out, OPZ Packs. And also pick up the new apps, Blipbox and Phase Monkey. Check out the presets for yourself and have some fun with them making music. So thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you later.
Yeah. See ya. Like and subscribe, Sketch.
Yes, that too. Yes. All right.